evolution and blessed unity with the L-O-V-E. Love is the solution, so set your love free with the L-O-V-E. Further evolution and blessed unity.
Good morning, our beautiful viewers. Oh, feedback. Woohoo!
Love feedback.
Welcome. I know we love feedback. Welcome to the show today. We're super stoked to be here. It's Thursday morning again, the Self-Love Show. I'm your co-host, Dawn Light, and this is my beautiful co-host, Trish Wright here. She's this way. And we have an amazing guest that I'm about to introduce. But before we do, I wanted to just remind our new viewers, in case this is your first time watching the show, welcome. We have a YouTube channel. We would love for you to go there. It's the Self-Love Show. We'll put the link in the chat later. But go check it out and go share all the old videos from the last 2 years of us doing this, because there's a lot of good golden nuggets in there, and it's really benefiting people's lives. It's so great to hear this and feedback from people we love, and new people even sharing how amazing this has been helping their life, and they got a little aha out of it. So without further ado, I'm going to move forward and introduce our amazing guest this morning, but I wanted to mention the YouTube channel. So we have a special friend and guest today on the show. Her beautiful name is Kim. Thank you, Kim, for joining us today, Dr. Kim. So I'm going to read her bio, and then we're going to get right into a juicy conversation. So one aspect of personal and spiritual growth is simply the element of awareness. We can cultivate awareness in many ways, but understanding our emotions and recognizing our shadow self can be powerful transformational tools. Our shadow is the aspect of our full, complete wholeness that we have pushed away, usually in childhood. In order to feel safe as we become more whole throughout our lives, a process Carl Jung calls individuation requires us to acknowledge and integrate this aspect of ourselves. The shadow can be hard to see because the ego wants to protect it, but Dr. Kim will take us through a simple exercise to start to be able to see and recognize what might be in our shadow right now. Integrating the shadow requires a certain level of emotional awareness, and one way to look at this is through the lens of the 5 elements from Chinese medicine and Taoism. As Doctor of Acupuncture and Chinese Medicine and licensed acupuncturist, Dr. Kim is well versed in this aspect of emotional balancing and will help us to learn the view of our emotions from another vantage point through the 5 element systems. Together, the recognition of the shadow and the integration of the emotions will help you feel more centered, more aware, and more able to show up as fully yourself in the world. Dr. Kim Peirano, DACM, LAC, is a practicing acupuncturist and transformational coach in San Rafael, California. She is a published author, speaker, and intuitive healer. Dr. Kim's treatments and offerings aim to access the deep inner workings of the mind-body-spirit connection to help her patients unlock the root cause of disharmony. Dr. Kim is the founder and CEO of the Integrative Healing Institute. Yes, sister, that's amazing. A nonprofit education and research institution with a mission to help educate practitioners and the general public of the connection of the spirit, mind, body in healthcare. In private practice, she treats patients for pain management and sports medicine, trauma, major life changes, and spiritual growth. And as a transformational coach, her work centers around helping her clients develop self-awareness, confidence, and the ability to transform their problems into opportunities. Yes, yes, yes. Her healing approach is to unblock misalignment in the body, mind, spirit so that her patients can experience a deeper level and layer of their most authentic self, free of pain, stress, tension, and full of confidence and vitality. So we'll share her links and her offerings and her meditations in a short little bit, and we're going to dive right in. So without further ado, welcome, Kim.
Thank you. It's always so weird having your bio and things read back to you. Like, I write it and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's me. And then having it read back, I'm like, wow, I do a lot of stuff. It's awesome.
You do a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so excited to have Kim on. I've known Kim for a little bit, briefly in and out for some years, and I'm really excited to have watched you create so many cool things. And the Institute is something that I'd love to talk about a little later, but I'm really excited to talk about that.
Yeah.
And I'm so stoked that you chose to talk about the shadow and recognizing your shadow. Because I think not only is it really like it's a hot word, but it's also it's also necessary. You can't heal what you can't see.
Right.
And you can't see it unless you're walking through it, or unless you're touching the places where you have judgments, or where you have insecurities or fears, or maybe you have habitual patterning, or maybe you have addictions or things like that you're not addressing. So I love the shadow.
Yeah, it's really cool work. The way that it just kind of like unfolds itself in all of these weird ways. And once we start like being able to recognize it and having some tools to like have the awareness of it more and more in the moment, then it starts to really move and transform, and like things in your life kind of start to unfold as you go through that process. It's really neat.
When you start asking yourself, why is this happening? Wait, I've had the same experience, different players of the game, but same experience. Why is that happening?
Right.
And who's the common denominator in this situation? Or you're like, oh God, maybe I'm doing it in some way.
Right.
For our viewers, and Dawn definitely knows that I love to be I love to play in the shadow, and I love to do the dark work, because I think it's crucial. And I joke, I'm like, don't worry, you don't have to go in there alone. I got a flashlight. You can go look in there. You're like, let's look at it. So, the shadow work. I've come to shadow work from a very Gestalt approach. So, currently my teacher is an angler, and we're doing lots of embodiment, open floor work. Do you know what open floor is?
Not really.
So it's like Gestalt awareness practice meets 5 rhythms dance. And then you sort of and it comes out to be this really like epic, embodied, wild, beautiful practice that is so deeply and profoundly moving.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it moves so much stuff to the surface, and it's fairly gentle, which I like. I don't know about anybody else, and maybe for our viewers, like, who else has done the, just like balls to the walls sort of healing? You're like, oh, let's just get in there, and you're like, oh, it takes a long time to integrate.
Yeah,
maybe it's not.
It does.
Yeah, useful sometimes, but not all the time. Yeah.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Gestalt work is so powerful. I've experienced in my own practice, and I guide my own clients through that. And in graduate school, I did a lot of it. And it is such a powerful tool to unearth what the shadow aspect is and come home to the exiled parts of self. Because that's really what the shadow is the exiled parts of self, or the misidentifications that were formed in the young self.
Right.
And I find that it's a very helpful tool. There's lots of ways to approach it, and I love the lens you're bringing forward today through the 5 elements. And I'm so curious to hear more about that, actually, because I know Trish and I have explored the shadow in a lot of ways, and we're just sharing our own ways, but it's so valuable to explore the shadow because it keeps us from being our authentic self when we're really acting out those old paradigms or old misidentifications that are causing hiccups in our relationships, or trauma experiencing resurfacing, or a projection where it's a disowned part and it's being projected out onto the lens of perception with other loved ones in our life. And that causes a lot of harm and disharmony amongst our loved ones when it's a part of ourself that we're not able to see or own.
Right. Because part of the shadow is that it's hidden, right? It's super hard to see it. Your ego's like, we're holding on to this for dear life. This is my safety blanket because we needed it when we were kids. I thing that I've been looking at a lot more lately is like there's two aspects of the shadow, right? So you have like the dark aspect and the light aspect, which I don't think gets talked about enough, where like the dark aspect are the things you probably like, if we're looking at childhood or where we kind of got these things from, is like the stuff that we were punished for as kids, right? Like you're too loud, and you get punished for it, or you're too angry, or whatever comes up. And then we start pushing those things into the shadow so that we don't, so that we feel safe, is really where that all comes from. But the other aspect is like this light aspect where it's the stuff you really enjoyed and you really loved that you had to push away because it wasn't accepted, right? It's like the boy who loves dancing and the father who goes, you're not allowed to do that and act like a girl. And then the dancing and that love gets pushed down.
Yeah.
And where I see that like coming out later in life is this, like, all the things are kind of okay in my life, but something is really missing, right? Like that, like empty piece that's like, I have the house and the kids and the job and all the things are in the row and they look fine from the outside, but there's like no soul to it, no depth to it. And it's those like light aspects that are kind of wanting to be reintegrated too, which is really, that's just, it's fascinating to me, the whole thing.
In spiritual psychology, what you're talking about, like the car and all the ducks in a row, we call that goal line living, because it's just goal line and it's all ego based, right?
Yeah.
To really step into the soul and come and really bring forward your authenticity and your full soul's expression, it takes doing the integrative shadow work to then express the soul line. And so your goal line and your soul line start to line up. And you peel away all those layers, and then you're living and embodying in the soul's expression and the soul line.
Those are really, I like those words.
Yeah,
that's a cool way
it's
to look at it.
a really awesome concept, a way to hold it.
Right. And like in Jungian psychology, like we look at sort of that as like the persona and shadow, right? So you have like those two aspects, and the persona is really what you put out into the world. That was what you developed as like, this is the safe way for me to exist. I find like the way to really like look at that is like, if you've ever met a person who seems super shallow, which is sort of that like goal line living, like all of the things are in the row, but like there's no depth, is like, that's a person fully living their persona and like with no integrated shadow parts. And when we start becoming more like deep and complex is when those shadow parts like pop up and then they get integrated, and then it's sort of this building and building until we become more of that wholeness that we're here to be.
Yes, beautifully said.
I got a question for both of you. Well, for all of us. I'm like, oh, let's share the shadows of the light and the dark for us. Like, how did you come to your own personal work? Because I think that, sharing like some of this piece of awareness of like, how did you get there is really important.
Yeah. For me, I think there was always a curiosity about more than just the surface stuff. I remember I had like an astrology book when I was like 10. And so there's like always this curiosity and like learning more about myself. And I think when I was a kid, I used to like have dreams and visions about all of my past lives. And like, thankfully my parents were really cool about it. They actually like interviewed me. There's a video somewhere. They like wrote it all down. It was really fun. So there was always this like connection to like more than just like more than meets the eye, but it always felt very misunderstood at the same time. Like nobody was ever able to really like see me for all of who I was. And so that was a ongoing battle of like, how much do I hide who I am? And then that tension of like, you're hiding who you are so nobody sees who you are. So then you feel really alone because it's all like this sort of packaging of your own doing that was to fit in, but it doesn't work at some point in time. And then, so I feel like in some way, like struggled with that forever, right? because it's always the same things that come up. When I was like 18, I wound up taking classes at the Berkeley Psychic Institute because they had like a psychic fair one day. And I was like, that sounds cool. Let's go see what that's about. And that was kind of like a stepping stone of like developing a meditation practice and learning how to listen to my intuition, and having like that kind of constant thing running in the background of like, I'm really smart. I'm doing all of these things, but like nothing's like gelling together like I would think it would. So there's always this like digging that I've been doing of like making sense of like the shitty things that have happened to me. Like what's been going on here? And why is this occurring? Like, and realizing like I'm the common denominator of all of this stuff. So how do I start to look at it and integrate and really like learn how to trust myself was one of the big things that I was looking at. Like, because I knew my intuition was very developed, like it's right. And then, you know, like fight it and second guess it all you want and get in more trouble. And just learning how to trust in that process.
Well said. Trust was a common denominator for me through my whole curriculum too, I would say. It was really because I was always very psychic and aware, but the aspect of in my own childhood, I was shamed for my light. Like I was very excited about life and very like energetic, and you know, I was a tiny little thing, and it was too much. My light was too much. So I went through this process of like dimming it in order to fit in, you know, and because I was shamed and abused truly and told horrible things. So I had a lot of layers of shame and guilt and, you know, just pure trauma and stress to peel back and let go of, you know, and it took me a long time to do that. It was a long journey. And really like it was a pattern of rejection for me. So I think that my soul stepped in with like a part of me that was disowned, and like I chose that family dynamic to go through that experience to reflect the rejection to myself, so that I could finally, in my adult years, finally own all parts of myself and finally lay down the place where I was rejecting my own light, and really get to embody and strengthen it and trust my intuition fully and come home to that place of like fully trusting spirit is holding all parts of my life, not just this part or that part or occasionally this, you know, and confusing it with the bad things that happened in my life, thinking that how come they have such a good life and I don't, right? Because that was always there, that story of questioning, why is my situation so effed up? And they look like they have like rainbows and unicorns just floating around in their front yard all the time. You know what I mean? Like, and it was very confusing for me as a child. It was really deeply confusing. And I didn't understand it because I innately was good, and I knew my goodness, and I knew myself as loving. And that was deeply hurtful and confusing. So I carried this deep confusion that I had to sort through internally for a long time. And it kept myself like small, and, you know, I was told to sit down and shut up. So I literally like learned to be very quiet as a mouse, literally. And I had to break out of that shell of like, even freeing my voice took a long time. And that's, you know, I had to literally learn to like allow myself to be freely expressed. And all of that was a journey of trust and coming home to greater levels of like, I've got this, I can do this, I believe in myself. And thankfully I had an amazing mother that was always like so right there with me, supporting me, pouring love into me. So it was like I had one unstable parent and one stable parent. So it was like, thankfully, and you know, my mother was very always like a God-loving woman and always bringing that forward. So it helped me integrate the shadow a lot. And even through her own very Christian window of perception, it's okay. You know, it's great. I'm so thankful. And I can honestly say it was the perfect scenario to help me unearth who I was and who I am today, right?
Which is awesome. Oh, I love that you see. Excited. That we all come to it through awareness, right? We're all coming through to it, and in the sense of like, oh, why does this keep happening? I came to my shadow in a relationship that was just really deeply traumatic. I was in like a 3-year PTSD trigger from some early childhood wounding and not finding myself in a regulated state. And I just couldn't figure it out. Like I was like, why am I so afraid? Why, like at this point I'm going through, I have like a therapist. I have 2 therapists. I have a coach. I'm going to workshops. I'm doing these things so that I can find regulation in my body. And what I ran up against is that, this is so funny. I created a situation that would literally push me into that. So I created a polyamorous relationship that would literally, like, I had no idea, run me into my biggest core wound. And I was like, emotional abandonment, physical abuse, stuff like that. I was like, I had no idea that that's what automatically I was working towards to get. And when I started to look up deeper, when I actually started to like step away and get into like drop my nervous system into a regulated state, I had a dream. I remember leaving my partner and like I had a dream that night, and this is how it's so funny. I had a dream about me as a little child, and I was a little girl, and I was reaching up for my dad, and he kind of gave me the like swat away. And I woke up and I was like, holy crap. I created all these crazy strategies to get my needs met, and they're mostly manipulative. Like they're socialized as female sort of behaviors, manipulative to get my needs met. And from that point, a few years ago, I was like, oh God, wow, I can't, like, whoa, and had to really reconcile those pieces, like really reconcile that even though I had this belief, my personality and my ego was like, I'm a good person. I was like, nope, I'm a manipulative weirdo as well. And where this has taken me is now I'm looking at the shadow of being socialized in a patriarchal white supremacist society, and how even just choosing to conform to the social norm is often rooted in behaviors and places of harm, because it's not loving the individual. It's not saying like, oh, Kim, you have these like super amazing qualities and talents that we're gonna like boost you for all of your humanness, or Don, you've got incredible skills in this and this and this, and we're gonna boost you there and really just celebrate your inherent humanly worth. Like it doesn't actually, these systems of social norm things are really part of the shadow. I totally riffed. Thanks for letting me go there.
Well, it's like all things can be applied to the society too. So it's not like necessarily even our own personal shadow, but the shadow of the whole group, right? Like your family has a shadow, your community does, the whole country does. Like everybody's kind of, because we do stuff in groups. It's not, you're not alone, right? So everybody's looking through all of the things at the same time. I've found it fun to apply a lot of these like Chinese medicine concepts to that, where like looking at the whole group of people. I've written some articles about that are on my blog thing. We're looking at like, why do people act this way? Like what's the root of the whole thing? And then you can look at through the like emotions and elements. We have another thing called the 5 spirits, which is kind of how we describe the psyche and our like spirituality is through those 5 spirit lenses. And like you can totally apply it to more than just you as an individual.
So just for fun, Because it sounds like we're all kind of like the kind of people who are like, ooh, let's dig into our shadow for fun. Do you have a line or like a tagline of what your family shadow is? So on my mom's side, mine is I'm always alone. That's the family shadow. I'm like, oh, that doesn't belong to me. I don't need that one.
I think on my mom's side is don't rock the boat. We don't rock the boat.
Do you have one, Dawn?
It's basically like the lens of perception around I'm rejected.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it was rooted in I could see the stem of like the self-worth piece in both of my parents.
Mm.
Yeah, there's like flips to both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them. Yeah.
On my dad's side, it's a little like it's kind of a little like don't rock the boat, but it's like there's some aspect of like stoicism.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, it's all good. Oh, not really. It's crazy in there.
That's a little bit how my dad's side is too. Or like, don't look too far below the surface, right? If we look too far down, it's going to blow everything up.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And then there will be epic proportions of disappointment.
Or I'm not okay with you looking so far down because I'm terrified.
Oh, yeah. Because I don't know what's down there.
Why are you so aware and so awake?
Why are you even looking?
This is blowing up
What do you
all of
mean?
my plans.
Why are you digging up all the drama?
Right.
Yeah, I got all those too.
It's yeah, there was a lot of like, we're just gonna sweep that under the rug in my family, you know, and I was like, we're just gonna pull the rug out and like dust it all out. I'm stirring the pot.
Is it one of those rugs, you know, with the long strings of fabric, you know, that like everyone made and they were in the like big circles and they were really heavy, you know, the ones?
Yeah.
I think every family has probably one of those.
Yeah. Family systems, you know. Earth School is masterfully crafted, though. I mean, the way you're talking about, you know, the systems of oppression and how it leads right into the shadow and it plays out. It's masterfully crafted for our awakening. Like this is the truth. We all get to learn our spiritual lessons, our own curriculum through the masterfully crafted Earth School, and it's in its full spectrum chaos and amazingness, right?
Full spectrum chaos.
Right?
I'll take that with me, put it in my pocket because that's
That's a good one.
I'm so curious about. I'm curious about how. Yeah, so taking this 5 elements. Can you talk a little bit about the 5 elements? We have. I don't think we've ever had an acupuncturist on or anyone talking about either a Chinese approach or a Taoist approach at all. So I'm curious.
Yeah.
You want to share that?
So like in my practice, I do a lot of acupuncture for spiritual growth and like mental health, which doesn't feel like that is not what you look at acupuncture as for, right? But it's really kind of inherently within that medicine because all of it's a lot about the body, mind, spirit. We're always like looking, you know, it's like treat the branch or treat the root. I see that there's like soil involved in that equation also, right? Like what's setting up the whole thing in the first place. And so to me, like the more like magical ways of looking at acupuncture is like the 5 elements, and it gets distilled down as like the schools now, it's like there's a lot of push to integrate into like Western systems of medicine. So a lot of that stuff gets stripped out. And originally it was like acupuncture was an alchemical art and like, right, the process of turning lead into gold or seeking immortality. And I kind of see that like seeking immortality piece is like not necessarily to like not die, but to be so close to source by the time you do die that like that transition is like insignificant, right? So we're like so embodied in like who you came here to be and so connected that like when the physical body dies, like it's like, oh, that's no big deal. And then you can move forward in the next thing. So the 5 elements is like, we describe things in the pattern of yin and yang. So that like Tai Chi symbol with that I drew on my everything in 6th grade, right? Which is like the dark and the light. We could look at the shadow work that way too. And within everything is the other thing. So it's like within the darkness is light, and within the light is an aspect of dark, and it's all relative. There's no like hard and fast yes and no, black and white kind of way of looking at anything through Chinese medicine in a lot of ways. And then so the next way we can drop stuff down is the 5 elements, and the 5 elements describes the kind of like the creation, destruction, balancing of everything in the whole universe, like in your body, in your mind, and like literally everything we could break into 5 elements. So the elements are water, wood, fire, earth, and metal. So metal's like the odd one out if you're not familiar with the Chinese systems. And each element then gets broken into other things like it helps describe. So like every season has an element associated with it. In the body, we have organ systems associated with it. They have emotions, they have virtues, they have colors, they have smells and tastes. Like literally everything. There's a sound. People who practice, so there's like a type of acupuncture specifically that's 5 element acupuncture, which is like a whole different system, which I think is just interesting on its own. Is like all acupuncturists are very different. We all learn different things. The way acupuncture like came about was like through family systems. So like if you get acupuncture from somebody who learned a Japanese system, it's going to be vastly different from a Chinese system. And within the Chinese systems, there are different systems. And then there's a 5 element system. There's a Korean acupuncture. There's all kinds of things. So within the 5 elements, right, these all have a generating cycle, a controlling cycle, and an insulting cycle. There's a reverse cycle. They help to describe like how those things keep each other in balance. So in the generating cycle is like everything is in balance moving into the next one, and we can look at them as sort of like family members, right? So you have like mother, child, grandchild, etc. So in that generating cycle, water creates wood. We can see how like it all makes perfect sense, right? Like you have to feed a tree with water for it to grow. Wood creates fire, so we need fuel for fire. Fire creates earth, so as that fire burns out, it creates that soil. And earth creates metal, which is like the gold and crystals that we find beneath the earth. And metal creates water. I see that more as like a chemical combustion type of reaction. And that cycle continues on. And so we can look at, in particular with like emotions, by looking at one of the emotions, we can look at these cycles and see like which element's creating that. Which element is after it, which one insults it, so we can get some idea, like we develop more awareness by just looking at it that way, so that we can, I guess ideally, or in most cases, the intention of looking at any of this stuff is to change it, right? But you kind of can't force the change of anything. But like having the awareness of it is usually pretty helpful. So the emotions that are associated with the elements. So for water is fear. And we can also associate elements with like times of life. So like a water time of life is like being elderly and dying. Like that's a water time. The water element's like the beginning and the end of the cycle. And we'll go through cycles like multiple times in our life too. Mm-hmm. Right. So it's like, I feel like I've been 17 different people in my whole life. There's like a whole complete cycle within each of those. And so the water element is fear, and its virtue is wisdom. So we have this like balancing act of like how we process and learn how to process fear ultimately kind of like brings us into a state of wisdom. The wood element's emotion is anger. Traditionally, like I add repressing emotions to that. You can kind of think of like the element of wood as like this up and out motion, right, that a tree has. But if we constrain that, it's going to be kind of problematic. So repressing emotions falls into that category. And the virtue of the wood element is compassion and humanitarianism.
Mm.
As we kind of learn how to, like, anger is one of those emotions that's like good and bad, right? We could be very angry and like rage and irritated, but the other element of anger is like our ability to hold our space, it's our setting boundaries, like sticking up for ourselves, which is totally a really important aspect. So as we kind of learn how to use that anger, we can come into a more healed place, and then we can look at that virtue of like humanitarianism, where I'm like able to help other people because I feel really secure in myself. Fire is a fun one because it's the traditional like emotion on all the textbooks is joy, which like it makes sense. Fire is kind of fun. It could also be like vulnerability. I think of like each of these is like an energetic scale. So like if you speed up that emotion of joy in kind of a pathological type of way, like we end up with the experience of like anxiety or like mania, right? So like excess joy is like too much energy that's moving through us. And so the virtue of the fire element is compassion, which is like the ability for me to hold my space and allow you to have your reality, which is like, it's not just like being blatantly nice to everybody, but like allowing people to have their reality without giving yours up at the same time. Yes. And then we move into the earth element, and the earth element traditionally is like sympathy and overthinking and worry. I add shame to this. Like I've never seen shame talked about in any of the textbooks. Maybe that wasn't in anyone's awareness back then, but shame fits in that category. And like this definition of sympathy here is like the people pleaser, right? Like, I just want to do everything for you. Like this is the patient that comes in who asks me 1,000 questions about my life and won't talk about theirs. And then like that overthinking and worry, which we see as like a fruitless use of chi. So chi is like the energy of our body. And so it's like taking that energy outside of ourselves and using it for something that's like literally going to go nowhere. So we deplete ourselves really quickly and significantly with excess worry in our awareness and system. And so the virtue of the earth element as we like start to heal these things is empathy, which is like a similar flavor, but a lot different, right? It's like really in a similar fashion to that compassion, where it's like, I'm still taking care of myself, but I can put myself in your shoes and understand your experience and like make you feel seen in that process. And then we move into the metal element, which is honestly like one of the most interesting ones, especially when we talk about like spirits. But the emotion of the metal element is grief. And you could kind of, the visual I see of that is like that heaviness of that metal beneath the earth, right? It's just like, and I could talk about this for so many hours. We have like a Chinese body clock. So it describes the circadian rhythm of like how energy moves through the organ systems. So you can Google like Chinese body clock and all these pictures will pop up. So 3 to 5 a.m. is lung time. And then 5 to 7 a.m. is large intestine. And those are both the metal organ systems. And so they have like a really cool, like you learn everything in school of like these very physical functions, but there's also emotional and spiritual functions. So the lung is about like breathing in literally air, but also like new information, new life, like new vitality, like being able to receive, period. And then the large intestine is about letting that go, like letting your crap go, quite literally in every sense of the word. So when we have issues that show up at these times of day, then they can be really good clues as to like what we should look at. So like insomnia from 3 to 5 a.m. would be like pointing towards something around grief, or like how we might not be letting things go, or not like taking the step that we need to be able to receive that healing that we're actually really seeking. So we have that metal element of grief, and then the virtue of the metal element is integrity. And you can just think about that as like metal in general. If you build something out, it has a lot of integrity. So being able to like really show up as who you are and like with that firmness. So that's kind of the rundown of like what those elements are in like this emotional landscape. And so how we can kind of look at them through our like process of self-awareness, right, is with the generating cycle. We could go into the controlling cycle and the insulting cycle, but there is not enough time to do that. I teach an 8-hour class on this. At some point we'll do it again. Is looking at the mother element, right? So like water creates wood. So water is the mother of wood. Wood creates fire. It's the mother of fire, etc. And like the funky part about this is like you could go back around this circle endlessly. So we'll never really know what the root element is by like using our mind to get there. But like it can give us some awareness, so we have a little bit more like something to work on. And the way that this like integrates into the shadow pieces is like when we get triggered by things, an emotion pops up, right? Like you feel fear, you feel angry. Like I get super triggered by entitled people, and that pisses me off like a lot. So I could go like, okay, this person's entitled. I'm totally triggered by it. And one of the things, so like, first of all, like recognizing that you're triggered by something is like step A. And like, it's really helpful to do this type of work with another person because like your ego's trying to hide that from you completely. So it's going to be like kind of difficult to like get to the root of what's really going on without the reflection of somebody else who has the awareness that you don't, which is like, if your ego's hiding it from you, you're not gonna find it very easily. And so we like recognize that there's the trigger, and then recognizing like the sensation that happens in your physical body.
Yes.
That good old feel your feelings, which we've been really conditioned to not do. Like we're very in our minds. So it's like, oh, it's anxiety. And then you can feel into your body, like what is that actual sensation? And that might be kind of different. There's no like hard and fast rule to like chest pain is anger or whatever, but like they're going to be kind of different, and actually feeling it is like what is allowing it to kind of exist. And then you're kind of looking at it, that light's shown on it, and now we can start to move it and work with it. Without doing that, it kind of goes nowhere. So we have that like trigger we noticing the feeling sensation in our body. We could go into like, why is it so bad for that person to be that way, right? Like an entitled person is like pushing people away because they act like a jerk all the time. There's going to be like,
do they even know?
Right. Totally. There's not a self-awareness. We can keep going down and down and down until we kind of find like, what is that kind of root thing, which is really what we're looking at there is like the root fear that we have, right? It's like this person has no self-awareness and pushes everybody away, and they die alone, right? Then we drop into that, like, what is that root fear of the things? And one of the things that always bothered me was when people say like, oh, what triggers you in other people is like what's inside yourself. And like that never made sense to me. I was like, I don't get it. I don't act like that person. Like I don't understand. And so one of the next piece that's been super helpful for me is like, we look at what does that person gain from being that way? So if I'm entitled, what do I get out of it? Like, oh, I feel like that person feels worthy of everything that they want. They're allowed to receive everything that they want, everything that they ask for and desire in life. Like they deserve, like they feel like they totally deserve it. And F everybody else who comes along, I'm going to get what I want. And like, so that's the piece. And so it's like the piece around what they gain from being that way. That's the piece that we are looking at integrating. So that's the piece of us that's in them.
So it's the payoff. We call it
Right.
the payoff. Yeah.
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 And so like for me, like receiving and feeling worthy, like that's been a thing I've had to like worked on a lot, right? So it makes total sense now. Like, oh, this person's entitled, they feel worthy, and it's just shoving it in my face that they feel worthy and I don't. And like, so that's where the trigger comes out.
Matching curriculum. It's the opposite end of the same pair. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Same patterning.
Yeah.
That's patterning works that way. We draw and attract and magnetize the exact thing to unearth what is inside of us.
Totally.
As a reflection, so the outer world is a reflection of inner world reality.
Exactly. And that's how it shows up, because right, the ego's trying to protect us from it. It doesn't want it to show up because it doesn't feel like we're going to be safe if we do that. So we basically project it onto other people.
Mm-hmm.
And as you like go through this work more and more, we stop needing to do that, which is what the cool part is. Like that's where you're going with it. It's like, oh, like I don't have to project this onto people. I can just do it in my dream time. That's a lot of what like nightmares are. It's like us working this shadow stuff out when you have like the dream of the vampire chasing you. It's like that's a shadow dream. So as you like, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to share. Speaking of working something out in my shadow, there's these chickens in Hawaii that were like, so in a couple of hurricanes, the hurricanes opened the doors to the chicken coops, and now there's chickens everywhere, like on roofs.
This is a dream or real life?
In real life.
Okay.
And in my dream there, because they crow at the weirdest times. Like,
yeah, it's not at the morning.
No, like all the time. And so 4:30 in the morning, the one out my window is crowing. And so I had a dream the second night I was at this place that I had got all the roosters and I had hung them up by their feet, like on a line. And I was like, well, I know what I'm working out here. I'm mad at these chickens because I want to sleep past 4:30. Time, right? I'm like, I am sleeping right now, you dirty little chickens. Anyway, sorry. It was just a thought.
That's a really funny dream for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, and all these chickens were like flapping around on this line, and I woke up and I was like, "You're not going to put these chickens on the line," and because I didn't want to hurt them,
right?
I just wanted them to stop. Now you know my shadow about the chickens.
Don't disrupt my peace.
Yeah, what I was going to say, I've said this many, many times, and thank God for Ron and Mary, but I wanted to just say how we relate to the issue is the issue. So if you're having anything surface in your life and you're confused by it and you don't understand what it is yet and you haven't gotten a grasp of what it is, just ask yourself, ponder that thought process. How I relate to the issue is the issue. Because it's like we can get caught up on what the other person is doing or what they're saying and think that how they express it is ours. But they're just expressing their end of the patterning that you're seeing. And so we can get confused, like you said, with the piece around the entitled person. You were confused by it because you were like, that doesn't land for me. That's not me.
Right.
But really, it's like how you were relating to it was the issue. And it was all the inner conversation for you around the worthiness piece.
Right.
Yes.
So that line or principle, it's a spiritual psychology principle, has helped my life so much because I would just deeply ponder it and know. And I would also back it up with, I have all the inner resources inside to handle this, to deal with this, to process it, to welcome it, to understand it, and I would just reaffirm that in myself, even if I didn't know yet. I would just reaffirm that principle and I would just be in the presence of and allow spirit to communicate with me inside myself what was really going on.
Mhm.
Who else who's watching or listening has the worthiness piece? Just by show of internal hands, because I can't see them.
Oh, I've definitely had it in my life, and it was riddled in my family dynamic.
I'm gonna guess, just because I live in the world with everyone else, is that's one of the things that we're taught. Is like the unworthiness piece, and if you're, what is it? Good guys finish last, and there's so many like stories about our own worth or our own receivingness, or what we can actually get, like hard work, and if you make good money, then you must be an asshole. Like there's all these belief systems around that keep us in these weird shadow states of like judging other people or holier than thou, or some aspects of, like that very shadowy Christianity pieces,
Mm-hmm.
So
I would imagine too, for most of the female identified people, that it's a big one. That's like totally tied into my family's like, don't rock the boat, right? Don't take up space.
yes.
Don't ask for too much. How dare you ask for too much? So it's just ingrained like across the whole board.
I know. I'm right now. I'm mashing a lot of the work that I've been doing over the last few years, and this sort of as I deepen my research of how we got here, I'm recognizing the shadow aspects of socialization, and I'm mashing it all together right now so I can help people see those things. It was like, do you do that because you want to do that, or do you do that because you were trained and socialized to be a woman,
right,
or be a man, or are you really not in touch with your feelings, or have you just been sort of like socially forced to disconnect? Just out of question, just let's like ask some questions here. And that's, this is why I love the shadow work. This is why I love looking at places that most people can't see. And this is why I love having, Dawn Light as one of my best friends, and as like my sister coach, because she's always like, hey, have you looked at that? And I'm like, no, but I will. Not right now, though. I'll think about it. Or, and what you said earlier, Kim, is it's really good to have someone else on your side. This is why we have therapists. This is why we have coaches. This is why we have acupuncturists. This is why we have friends, is to really step up. My definition of love has really drastically changed from this whatever idea that we had as like some Disney Channel whatever thing, to showing up and being like, hey, Kim, have you looked at this thing? Or hey, Dawn, have you looked at this thing? Or even in the mirror and being like, hey, Trish, you're doing that thing again. Like, I love you enough to check you on your stuff. And is this part of your integrity? Is this part of your value system? Is this part of how you want to move forward? So I think that, gosh, yeah, I'm very, yeah, I'm going to take your 8-hour course on shadow work and 5 elements.
Yeah, that's fun.
What a cool thing that your clients get to come to you and have these deep conversations. You're able to apply acupuncture and like work on the body and have these emotional releases and, ultimately more integration of the shadow. That's so amazing.
Yeah, it's really fun. I mean, because it's like I have a lot of spiritual communities, and it's a lot of work outside of the body, right? Or like we're doing a bunch of therapy. It's like, here up a lot of the time you're just like in your head or outside of your body, but like we live here, we have bodies, and the body like stores a lot of that stuff. So particularly with the acupuncture kind of smooshed together, like where we can start unlocking some of those some of those things where stuff starts to move. In particular, like where we have physical stuff going on that doesn't have like diagnosable causes, or where you're like go to every doctor and nothing comes of it. I see those lots of times as like spiritual, emotional stuff that's showing up. So the body's trying to process it, and it's showing up as pain or dysfunction or tumors or whatever it is that's causing this problem, or a recurring thing that keeps happening over and over and over again. And so if we start to really like look into it instead of trying to push it away more and more, like we can move into that like true healing space, which is just like returning to that original intention that we have. So we're not like, and then sometimes like stuff gets to go away and we feel better, and sometimes we don't. Like that's kind of the nuance of the whole thing. It's like we can have more awareness of what's going on and experience a different like reality around it, which changes the experience of it. So it's like, oh, now you can live with this like debilitating arthritis pain because now we've accepted that like this is teaching me how to go slower, and move forward in that way. And that's like a lot of the work with like terminal patients or like long-term disease. Like we're not going to make that go away. Like that's just, we're going to die. It's going to happen. It's not a bad thing. And we can have a like really beautiful experience through that whole transitional state. I find that like a lot of the acupuncture research is kind of funky because it doesn't really fit into the like randomized clinical control trial model very well, because like we can't have a control, because even not doing acupuncture and faking it's still acupuncture. But where they'll like compare like the acupuncture group to the drug group, and it'll be like similar, or maybe the acupuncture was a little bit less effective, but they also measure like, so it'll be pain levels and quality of life. And quality of life tends to be very improved in an acupuncture group compared to a drug group, even if the pain levels don't change or like pain got worse, but the quality of life goes up because it's helping us kind of like re-regulate how we experience pain. Instead of trying to fight it away, we can start to kind of see it as a teacher, as something that we can look into and learn from. And then it starts to shift the experience of it without making it go away.
Are you saying that my strategy for pushing things away and resisting it isn't going to work? I've used it my whole life, Kim. Like it's
right.
It's not working, but I mean, it's not going to work.
The more you push, the stronger it pushes back, right?
I just put in the chat all your lovely, lovely website and places to get in touch with you. The work you're doing in the world is amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is really wonderful to hear and see a 5 elements strategy applied to, acupuncture. It's so cool. Yeah. I'm sure there's so many ways this can assist and elevate someone's life.
Yeah, it's really fun work. It's just,
I can tell you're very passionate about it. It's wonderful to see.
Yeah. It's really fun. I find it like very pretty in a way. Like it's just like there's so many options and choices of like how you can put things together and like see stuff in different ways. And I have like the TikTok page, and like every time I've had a viral video, it's been a terrifying experience because it's a lot of energy that comes back at you. And like one of the things I'll say is like, as you like look at stuff through different lenses like this, it's not like we have a new problem. I have like a little series where we like go through the spirits, and like one of them people really resonated with, and it was like, oh no, now I have this problem. And it's like, no, that's just another way to look at, you already have that stuff going on. It's not new. It's just another way of looking at it. So you have more tools in the toolbox to like get at it. It's not like one thing's not going to be the solution most of the time. So we can just look at it in a different way, not as like some new problem.
Exactly. I'm wondering, did you want to take us through a practice, or are you?
It was kind of a lot of just information.
Yeah. I know. I was like, I just wanted to check
Part
in.
of that, like, but I would like to go through like how we can look at the emotions and the mother elements to understand them more. So like, just by like looking at that is how we can do that self-reflection process.
Ooh,
To
yeah.
understand the emotion, like where is this emotion coming from, so I can get more awareness of it, and then
Wonderful.
let you go. So we can look at the generating cycle, so that water, wood, fire, earth, metal, water cycle. So on the first one we'll look at is that fear gives rise to anger. So water creates wood. When we find ourselves like really stuck in the emotion of anger, so we would want to look at these cycles of emotions when we find ourselves like either like experiencing an emotion a lot, like where it's like really kind of disrupting our lives, or we're experiencing an emotion where it doesn't make any sense. So like you're having excess like anger outbursts, but there's not really a reason why. Or we're not experiencing that emotion at all. So we're like, you're in a situation where you should experience grief and it's not coming up. So that's like, those are signs to me where like we should look at what's going on here a little bit more deeply. So fear, water, gives rise to anger, wood. And so when we find ourselves stuck in the emotion of anger, like it might be our go-to emotion experienced, we want to look at the mother of the emotion that we're having. So the emotion we're having is anger. The mother of anger is water, fear. And this one I find particularly profound is like there's no anger without fear precipitating it. So if you like are driving down the road, somebody cuts you off and you start screaming at them with like road rage, like that didn't just happen out of nowhere. Like somebody almost killed you is sort of how we perceive that. So that fear is underlying the experience of anger that we have. Anger says like, I'm afraid and I need to protect myself. So if we want to kind of get more awareness of like, where is the anger coming from? What's going on when we experience the feeling of anger, like stopping to deepen our self-awareness, take a pause and ask, like, what is the fear that I'm having also or recently have? With my example of like being really triggered by people who are entitled, it's like, they're going to get everything and I'm not, right? So this is like how we can use this as a reflection tool to help us understand like where our emotions are coming from. And as that like builds and builds and builds, we're not only like giving that emotion permission to exist and like be here, but it also, in doing that, allows it to move. It like gives it to the space to move. So we like loosen the grip and then it can move and transform itself in whatever way it needs to. So as we move up that generating cycle, we have wood creates fire. So, and I see this one where we're going to look at the repressed emotion aspect of wood. So repressing emotion feeds anxiety. So that anxiety aspect of the fire element. And I see this where it's like the idea of if you have a tea kettle and it had no spout and no little like hole in the top of it, and you turn that on the burner and it would just like jump around and go nuts. Like that's like the experience of like anger creating anxiety, where it's like, or the repressed emotion that's creating anxiety. It's holding everything in and it has nowhere to move and nowhere to go. We might see this a lot with like failing to set boundaries that are important to us. We're having anxiety, not sure where it's coming from. We can kind of track back to like, was there a situation recently where like I felt like I should have said something and I didn't? So this wood element like grows and grows and it really like fuels that fire element. So we're getting that imbalance in that element cycle, and where it pushes past that like delightful experience of joy into experiencing anxiety. So one aspect of like how we can use this also is like going back to that repressed, like how do I get that repressed emotion out? And so in a state of like experiencing anxiety, we want to like feel calm again, but sometimes we actually have to move that emotion out of our body. Like there's sensation, emotion that's being held inside of our physical body. So we need to like open the spout and get it out. And we might do that with like going for a run, punching a pillow, like singing, like where there's like a physical aspect to like really starting to release it. And like opening that release valve to help things. We're in that respect, we're removing the wood, the fuel from the fire that we're experiencing there. And our next step on this is the fire creating earth. So we have anxiety feeding overthinking. And this like makes perfect sense to me. Obviously, like if we're feeling anxious, it's going to feed into that overthinking. At the root of overthinking on most levels is going to be some anxiety where we're like using our chi in that pointless endeavor to worry about stuff that we really probably have no control over. Anxiety is a lot of concern about the future, which we don't have that control over, and it removes us from our present moment. So we have our most power in that present moment. So if we're not in it, there's not anything we can really do. We can think of anxiety and overthinking as like a feedback loop too, where they kind of feed into each other. If we're looking at the other element cycles, like fear plays into this as well, because fear is like that underlying root of anxiety too. This anxiety is sort of a type of manic energy, right? It's like that super fast, high vibration, like fast vibration of that like joy that's gone kind of off kilter. And then it just feeds into that like overthinking and rumination because it has no place to go. It's just like feeding into that earth. You have a fire that's like out of control and it's just creating more and more earth, just piling on the dirt pile more and more and more. And then we have the experience of earth creating metal. And this is where we'll look at shame. So shame creating grief. Shame is guilt that's pointed inwards at ourselves. It's pretty counterintuitive to like our ability, will, drive to survive. Like it's very like we could have the experience of shame over something that we did, but shame in this case is like shame within ourselves, which doesn't make sense like from an evolutionary standpoint. It goes against our inherent will to live because it's directed inwards and it halts any movement. If you're familiar with like David Hawkins' work, like his like consciousness levels, shame is the lowest vibration on that scale. And it's often harbored by the lies that we tell ourselves. So we like hold shame in our system through like a series of lies or make believes that we kind of tell ourselves in this process. And it keeps us in that perpetual cycle of shame. And eventually, like this is what one aspect of how I see depression being created. I've experienced this myself, like in a relationship that was just totally not right for me. And I'm telling myself the lie that like, it could be this, it could be this way. And believing that when the reality was very different. Yes. So there's shame like harbored in that process of like telling yourself a lie in the first place. And then it really starts to sink into that experience of grief and depression. So one path like out of depression in this particular situation is like finding the line. That's where having the person who's going to check you on stuff can be really helpful. And like, even when we see it, we're not ready to let it go all the time. Like it took a long time to get to that place where you're like, okay, I'm done with this now. So we can just kind of get ourselves off of that cycle because it's a cycle of that like feedback into the next thing over and over and over again. And then finally, we have metal that creates water. So this is grief moving to fear. And this one's kind of interesting. It's a little different than the others. And I see this as where, like, if we have the experience of grief, that's a rightful experience, right? Somebody died. You were in a car accident. We had a traumatic experience. We were experiencing grief. The way that this sort of ends up creating fear is when we don't like fully address it. We don't fully feel into it. We don't fully process it. We don't fully heal the experience, the trauma, or the events that led to that grief in the first place. We kind of have this like aspect of denial. And in that aspect where we're like ignoring this one little piece of the grief, it creates fear that keeps us stuck because we don't want to experience that experience again.
Yeah.
So we're like holding this little piece, and that's like the little nugget that's creating choices that we might make in our life so that we avoid patterns, places, people, things that might create that experience again. And grief is the emotion most associated with pain, right? And like, obviously we want to avoid pain. Nobody likes pain. Some people like pain, but for the most part, we don't like pain. And so in the attempt to avoid pain, avoiding that grief, we create fear. So I don't want to experience the pain again and create a fear of whatever occurred that caused the grief in the first place. Or I'm like preoccupied with avoiding the pain, which leads to a fear of like what could happen if I tried to heal, or that ultimate like fear of the unknown, right? If we've been holding on to this pattern for so long that it feels like part of our identity, like truly like feeling all of the stuff that happened in that period of time or whatever the event was, can feel really scary because it's that looking down the barrel of like my identity no longer existing if I fully let this go.
Wow.
So that's a little nugget of the generating cycle and how we can look at the emotions associated with it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think those are very helpful tools and tips for self-awareness. Just keeping it going, to keep. It's an invitation to continue to look deeper and utilize your feelings. It's a cool tool. I'm gonna
Yeah, I think it's super neat. Like, and obviously it's not the only way to look at things, right? And it's like, right, it's not the end all be all, but it's a really neat way to go, okay, like I want to know more about what this is coming from. And like, this is like, I'll journal on what my fear is if I'm having a lot of anger or whatever it is.
Well, it helps pinpoint what's going on, because you're like, oh, I'm experiencing this. Then you can actually know where to look.
Right.
That's the actual wonderful thing, because a lot of times people are so caught in the emotion, they don't understand. They're just so in the emotion of it. They don't understand really where the root is stemming from or how to even get there.
Totally.
Or where to look even, because it's so overwhelming sometimes.
Right.
That big expression of emotion.
Exactly.
So it's like a little map, like follow this map.
Exactly.
This emotion, look here.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I would recommend like going into like looking at this stuff like when we're not in that like super reactive emotion state, right? It's like, okay, like I'm experiencing all of this right now. Like as you get more familiar and better with it, like the timing gets closer, like where I think what happens a lot of times is you have one experience, like 2 days later you realize what happened. But like when we're in that like safe space where we are more calm, then we're going to be able to like have this real reflection process where we're going to get some juice out of it instead of trying to do it in a reactionary moment. It's going to be a lot harder by ourselves. Like with another person, it might be really helpful.
I know you do have to jump off because it's like you said you have a window of time.
Yeah.
You want to honor that. But thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
This beautiful value you bring to the world, and
Thank you.
it makes me want to come get acupuncture from you.
I'm here in San Rafael.
Awesome.
And then for any of the Integrative Healing Institute is a bunch of classes and fun things. We do like CEU credits for acupuncturists right now, hopefully like more things in the future. But most of the classes are open to everybody unless they're like acupuncture specific skill type classes.
Awesome.
Fun things coming up there.
Yay.
Well,
you're in the chat. So for any of our viewers that need to source Kim's work and like check her out, they're all in the chat. So go explore.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you again. It's been so lovely to have you on and so appreciative of what you do in the world. It's wonderful to hear and see.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's really fun.
Yeah. Did you have something you want to say, Trish? Is she frozen? I think
Yeah.
she's frozen.
Yes.
Yeah. There you are.
I was just saying thank you. Thank you so much for your time and your energy, your wisdom, and the years of experience and looking through the shadow that you've done so that you can lead people through and love people through.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're wonderful. It's nice to see your face.
You too.
Oh, hey, Dawn, tell us a little bit about what you got going on.
Oh, I've got an exciting offer on the table. Come on in. It's juicy. I'm going to be launching or hosting a 4-day Sovereign Queen activation on April 25th through the 28th. We'll put the link in the chat. This is a place where you can come, and every day I'm going to be teaching on really big topics around the number one reason why patterning can exist in relationships and help you really explore what that is. And so I'm going to be giving away amazing prizes every day, and it's juicy and awesome. It's just based on my life's work, my life's experience, and it's just such a wonderful offer. So it's an opportunity to really reclaim your radiance, restore your trust, and get the love you want in your relationships, and explore what the deeper patterning is for you. And so I've built a really beautiful offering. I'm going to just dive right in. I got a lot of amazing slides to share, and it's Sovereign Queen activation. So come get activated and step further into your sacred heart of queendom that exists inside of you already. Your sovereignty is there. It just sometimes needs a little polishing and activation to come out even more and be that authentic, beautiful voice and self that you've come to be. So it is for women. It is in my private Facebook group for women is where it will be taking place. So if you're a woman and want to peel back the layers of where your relationship is not, it has felt really out of balance, and you haven't felt centered, something's off, there's patterns playing out, and you're not sure how to really identify what it is, then come in and explore this here. So we'd love to have you, just spreading the word, and please spread the word to your sisters. Invite your sisters, share the link. It's www.tinyurl.com/sovereign queen. And so come join. I'm so excited to do this. It's gonna be fire.
And I'm really excited to walk with you on this journey.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm freezing. I'm sorry.
Huh?
I'm freezing. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
So I'd love to just give a shout out again to Kim. Thank you so much for your time and your energy, and for Scott Katamas and Love Coach Academy, as well as Sign Network for running us out on 40 different channels right now. Thank you so much. And for all those who are listening now, thank you for being here. And for all those who are listening later, thank you for being here as well. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.